Hey crew, it's Pitt, and I'm back with some more philosophy. Today we're diving back into the works of Georg Hegel. This is the science of logic we are reading aloud and not really discussing as we go along the various points that are brought to light by the text. It is not the format for everyone, but some people find value in it, so you are more than welcome to tag along as we continue our exploration. Before we begin, however, if you are unfamiliar with me, any of my unconventional beliefs, or if at any point in time I lose you in the terminology, there will be several playlists linked in the corner above, in the box down below, along with the original source material and the link for my book, so that you can get a better understanding of who I am and why I say the things that I do. With that being said, let us dive in and continue our exploration of the science of logic with Chapter 3, Ratio or Quantitative Relation. The infinity of quantum has been determined up to the point where it is the negative beyond of quantum, a beyond which quantum, however, has within it. This beyond is the qualitative moment in general, the infinite quantum, as the unity of the two moments of the quantitative and the qualitative determinateness, is in the first instance ratio. In ratio, quantum no longer has a merely indifferent determinateness, but is qualitatively determined as simply referring to its beyond. It continues in its beyond, and this beyond is, at first, just an other quantum. Essentially, however, the two do not refer to each other as external quanta, but each, rather, possesses its determinateness in this reference to the other. In their otherness, they have thus returned into themselves what each is that it is in its other. The other constitutes the determinateness of each. The quantum's self-transcendence does not now mean, therefore, that quantum has simply changed either into some other or into its abstract other, into its abstract beyond, but that there, in the other, it has attained its determinateness. In its other, which is an other quantum, it finds itself. The quality of quantum, its conceptual determinateness, is its externality as such. And in ratio, quantum is now posited as having its determinateness in this externality, in another quantum, as being in its beyond what it is. It is quanta that stand to each other in the connection that has now come on the scene. This connection is itself also a magnitude. Quantum is not only in relation, but is posited as relation. It is a quantum, as such, that has that qualitative determinateness in itself. So, as relation, as ratio, quantum gives expression to itself as self-enclosed totality, and to its indifference to limit by containing the externality of its being determined in itself. In this externality, it is only referred back to itself and thus infinite within. Ratio, in general, is 1. Direct ratio. In this, the qualitative moment does not yet emerge explicitly as such. In no other way except still as quantum is quantum, posited as having its determinateness in its externality. In itself, however, the quantitative relation is the contradiction of externality and self-reference, the persistence of quanta and their negation. Such a contradiction next sublates itself. 2. First, inasmuch as in indirect or inverse ratio, the negation of each of the quanta is, as such, co-posited in the alteration of the other, and the variability of the direct ratio is itself posited. 3. But in the ratio of powers, the unity, which in its difference refers back to itself, proves to be a simple self-production of the quantum, this qualitative moment itself, finally posited in a simple determination and as identical with the quantum, becomes measure. About the nature of the following ratios, much was anticipated in the preceding remarks concerning the infinity of quantity, that is, the qualitative moment in it. It only remains to analyze, therefore, the abstract concept of this ratio. And just as a quick refresher of a couple of things, right? We're pretty far into this study so far. The entire first part was setting out some definitions, right? Infinity is beyond measure. If you can measure infinity, it is by definition finite. If there is any definition placed upon infinity, it becomes finite. And then we saw the process of negation. If this thing is not true, then we get a truth from the not truth, right? That is the negation. Most of this section, the second section, is a reiteration in mathematical terms, the exact same concepts that we covered in the first terms. And so this again is just leading into that. What it is saying is that until there is a relationship, there is no ratio. Once there is a relationship, then there is a ratio between the relationship. Whether it is indirect or inverse by the negation, or whether it is a ratio of powers by positivity, it is a ratio between these two finite things. And that's really what's being said here. There's a lot of reiteration of the same concepts. I'm not going to bother with stopping to rehash the things that we've already done, even though most of this work is going to be that. We're fairly far along since the last time that I had a little talk about it in the way that we're doing here. Right? We explained a lot of the concepts in the first one, the first book. The second book, which we are in, is dealing more with math, and so I'm not a polymath. I enjoy math. I do algebra in my head, but many of the things in here I haven't studied, and so I don't have the technical knowledge to extrapolate greatly beyond the conceptual things that we've already discussed in other places. And just to keep from becoming repetitive, we're not going to continue to just rehammer these concepts that we've already done. If any of this is confusing, fall back to the beginning of the science of logic, because really the first 3 chapters lay out everything that we've been talking about so far. All right. A, the direct ratio. 1. In the ratio which, as immediate, is direct, the determinateness of each quantum lies in the reciprocal determinateness of the other. There is only one determinateness or limit of both, one which is itself a quantum, namely the exponent of the ratio. The exponent 2. The exponent is some quantum or other. However, in referring itself to itself in the otherness which it has within it, it is only a qualitatively determined quantum, for its difference, its beyond and otherness, is in it. This difference in the quantum is the difference of the unit and amount. The unit, which is the being determined for itself, the amount, which is the indifferent fluctuation of determinateness, the external indifference of quantum. Unit and amount were at first the moments of quantum. Now, in the ratio, in quantum as realized so far, each of its moments appear as a quantum on its own and as determinations of the existence of the quantum, as delimitations against the otherwise external, indifferent determinateness of magnitude. The exponent is this difference as simple determinateness, that is, it has the meaning of both determinations immediately in it. First, it is a quantum and thus an amount. If the one side of the ratio, which is taken as unit, is expressed in a numerical 1 and has only the value of 1, then the other, the amount, is the quantum of the exponent itself. Second, it is a simple determinateness as the qualitative moment of the sides of the ratio. When the quantum of the one side is determined, the other is also determined by the exponent, and it is not a matter of total indifference how the first is determined. It no longer has any meaning as a quantum determined for itself, but can just as well be any other quantum without thereby altering the determinateness of the ratio, which rests solely on the exponent. The one side which is taken as a unit always remains a unit, however great it becomes, and the other, however great it too thereby becomes, must remain the same amount of that unit. 3. Accordingly, the two truly constitute only one quantum. The one side has only the value of a unit with respect to the other, not of an amount, and the other only of that amount. According to their conceptual determinateness, therefore, they are themselves not complete quanta. But this incompleteness is, in them, a negation, and it is not so because of their general variability, according to which one of them, any of the two, can assume all possible magnitudes, but because they are so determined that as one is altered, the other is increased or decreased in corresponding measure. This means that, as indicated, only one of them, the unit, is altered as quantum. The other side, the amount, remains the same quantum of units. And the first side too retains the value of a unit, however much it is altered as quantum. Each side is thus only one of the two moments of quantum, and the self-subsistence, which is their proper characteristic, is in principle negated. In this qualitative combination they are to be posited as negative with respect to each other. The exponent ought to be the complete quantum, since the determinations on both sides of it come together in it. But in fact, even as quotient, the exponent only has the value of amount, or of unit. There is nothing available for determining which of the two sides of the relation would have to be taken as the unit or the amount. If one side, quantum B, is measured against quantum A as unit, then the quotient C is the amount of such units. But if A is itself taken as amount, the quotient C is the unit which is required by the amount A for the quantum B. As exponent, therefore, this quotient is not posited for what ought to be, namely the determinant of the ratio, or the ratio's qualitative unity. It is posited, as such, only to the extent that its value is that of the unity of the two moments, of unit and amount. And since these two sides, as quanta, are indeed present as they should be in the explicated quantum, in the ratio, but at the same time have the value which is specific to them as the sides of the ratio, of being incomplete quanta, and of counting only as one of those qualitative moments, they are to be posited with this negation qualifying them. Thus, there arises a more real ratio, one more in accordance with this definition, one in which the exponent has the meaning of the product of the sides. In this determinateness, it is the inverse ratio. B. The inverse ratio. 1. The ratio as now before us is the sublated direct ratio. It was an immediate relation and therefore not yet truly determinate. Henceforth, the new introduced determinateness gives the exponent the value of a product, the unity of unit and amount. In immediacy, as we have just seen, it was possible for the exponent to be indifferently taken as unit or amount. Moreover, it also was only a quantum in general, and therefore an amount by choice. One side was the unit, and this was to be taken as a numerical 1, with respect to which the other side would be a fixed amount, and at the same time the exponent. The quality of the latter, therefore, was only that this quantum is taken as fixed, or rather, that the constant only has the meaning of quantum. Now, in the inverse ratio, the exponent is, as quantum, likewise immediate, a quantum or other which is assumed as fixed. But to the one of the other quantum in the ratio, this quantum is not a fixed amount. The ratio, previously taken as fixed, is now posited instead as alterable. If another quantum is taken as the unit of the one side, the other side now no longer remains the same amount of units of the first side. In direct ratio, this unit is only the common element of both sides. As such, it continues into the other side, the amount. The amount itself, or the exponent, is by itself indifferent to the unit. But, as the determinantness of the ratio now is, the amount as such alters relative to the unit with respect to which it makes up the other side of the ratio. Whenever another quantum is taken as the unit, that amount alters. Consequently, although the exponent is still only an immediate quantum and only arbitrarily assumed as fixed, it does not remain fixed in the side of the ratio. Rather, this side, and with it the direct ratio of the sides, is alterable. In the ratio now before us, the exponent as the determining quantum is thus posited as negative towards itself as a quantum of the ratio, and hence as qualitative, as limit. The result is that the qualitative moment distinctly comes to the fore for itself against the quantitative moment. In the direct ratio, the alteration of the two sides is only the one alteration of the quantum from which the unity, which is the common element, is taken. By as much, therefore, as the one side is increased or decreased, so also is the other. The ratio itself is indifferent to this alteration, and the alteration external to the ratio. In the indirect ratio, on the contrary, although still arbitrary according to the moment of quantitative indifference, the alteration is contained within the ratio, and its arbitrary quantitative extension is limited by the negative determinantness of the exponent as by a limit. 2. We must now consider this qualitative nature of the indirect ratio more closely, as it is realized, and sort out the entanglement of the affirmative and the negative elements, the negative moments that are contained in it. Quantum is posited as being quantum qualitatively, that is, as self-determining, as displaying its limits within it. Accordingly, first, it is an immediate magnitude as simple determinantness. It is the whole as existent, an affirmative quantum. But, second, this immediate determinantness is at the same time limit. For that purpose it is distinguished into two quanta, which are, at first, the other of each other. But, as the qualitative determinantness of these quanta, and as a determinantness which is, moreover, complete, quantum is the unity of the unit and the amount, a product of which the two are the factors. Thus, on the one hand, the exponent of the ratio is, in them, identical with itself, and is their affirmative moment by which they are quanta. On the other hand, as the negation posited in them, it is, in them, the unity according to which each, at first an immediate and limited quantum in general, is at the same time so limited as to be only implicitly in itself identical with its other. Third, the exponent, as the simple determinate-ness, is the negative unity of this differentiation of it into the two quanta, and the limit of their reciprocal limiting. In accordance with these determinations, the two moments limit themselves inside the exponent, and each is the negative of the other. For the exponent is their determinate unity. The one moment becomes as many times smaller as the other becomes greater. Each possesses a magnitude of its own, to the extent that this magnitude is in it, that of their other. That is the magnitude that the other lacks. The magnitude of each in this way continues into the other negatively. How much it is in amount, that much it sublates in the other as amount, and is what it is only through the negation or limit, which is posited in it by the other. In this way, each contains the other as well, and is proportioned to it, for each is supposed to be only that quantum which the other is not. The magnitude of the other is indispensable to the value of each, and therefore inseparable from it. This continuity of each in the other constitutes the moment of unity, through which the two magnitudes stand in relation. The moment of the one determinateness of the simple limit, which is the exponent. This unity, the whole, constitutes the in itself of each from which their given magnitude is distinct. This is the magnitude according to which each is only the extent that it takes from the other, a part of their common in itself, which is the whole. But each can take from the other only as much as it will make it equal to this in itself. It has its maximum in the exponent which, in accordance with the stated second determination, is the limit of the reciprocal delimitation. And since each is a moment of the ratio only to the extent that it limits the other and is thereby limited by it, it loses this, its determination, by making itself equal to it in itself. In this loss, the other magnitude will not only become a zero, but vanishes. For what it ought to be is not just a quantum, but what it is as such a quantum, namely, only the moment of a ratio. Thus, each side is the contradiction between the determination as its in itself, that is, as the unity of the whole, which is the exponent, and the determination as the moment of a ratio. This contradiction is infinity again, in a new form peculiar to it. The exponent is the limit of the sides of its ratio, within which limit the sides increase and decrease proportionally to each other. But they cannot become equal to this exponent because of the latter's affirmative determinateness as quantum. Thus, as the limit of their reciprocal limiting, the exponent is alpha, their beyond, which they infinitely approximate but can never attain. This infinity, in which the sides approximate their beyond, is the bad infinity of the infinite progression. It is an infinite infinity which is itself finite, that finds its restriction in its opposite, in the finitude of each side and of the exponent itself, and for this reason is only approximation. But, beta, the bad infinite is equally posited here as what it is in truth. namely the negative moment in general, in accordance with which the exponent is the simple limit as against the distinct quanta of the ratio. It is the in itself to which, as the absolutely alterable, the finitude of the quanta is referred, but which, as the quanta's negation, remains absolutely different from them. This infinite, which the quanta can only approximate, is then equally found affirmatively present on their side, the simple quantum of the exponent. In it is attained the beyond, with which the sides of the ratio are burdened. It is, in itself, the unity of the two, or, consequently, in itself the other side of each side. Each side has only as much value as the other does not have. Its whole determinateness, thus, rests in the other, and this, their being in itself, is, as affirmative infinity, simply the exponent. 3. With this, however, we have the transition of the inverse ratio into a determination other than the one it had at first. This consisted in the fact that the quantum is immediate, but at the same time so connected to an other that the greater it is, the smaller is the other. That it is what it is by virtue of negatively relating to the other. Also, a third magnitude is the common restriction on this alteration in magnitude that the two quanta undergo. This reciprocal alteration, as contrasted to the fixed qualitative limit, is here their distinctive property. They have the determination of alterable magnitudes, for which that fixed limit is an infinite beyond. But the determinations that have emerged and which we now have to sum up are not only that this infinite beyond is at the same time some present finite quantum or other, but that its fixity, which makes it with respect to the quantitative moment the infinite beyond that it is, and which is the qualitative moment of being only as abstract self-reference, has developed itself as a mediation of itself with itself in its other, the finite moments of the relation. The general point is that the whole is, as such, the limit of the reciprocal limiting of the two terms, and that the negation of the negation, and consequently infinity, the affirmative self-relation, is therefore positive. The more particular point is that as product, the exponent already implicitly is already the unity of unit and amount, whereas each of these two terms is only one of two moments, and for this reason the exponent encloses them in itself, and in them it implicitly refers itself to itself. But in the inverse ratio, the difference has developed into the externality of quantitative being, and the qualitative being is not only something fixed, nor does it simply enclose the two moments of the ratio immediately in it, but in the externally existent otherness, it rejoins itself. It is this determination that stands out as a result in the moments we have seen. The exponent, namely, is found to be the implicit being whose moments are realized in quanta and in their generalized alterability. The indifference of the magnitudes of these moments in the course of their alteration displays itself as an infinite progression, the basis of which is that in their indifference, their determinateness is to have their value each in the value of the other. Thus, alpha, according to the affirmative side of their quantum, the determinateness of the moments is that each is in itself the whole of the exponent. Equally, beta, they have the magnitude of the exponent for their negative moment, for their reciprocal limiting. Their limit is that of the exponent. The fact that such moments do not have any other imminent limit, any fixed immediacy, is posited in the infinite progression of their existence and in their limitation, in the negation of every particular value. This is, accordingly, the negation of the externality of the exponent which is displayed in them, and the exponent itself equally a quantum as such, and also expanded into quantum, is thereby posited as preserving itself in the negation of the indifferent subsistence of the moments, as rejoining itself, and thus as the determining factor in this movement of self-surpassing. The ratio is hereby determined as the ratio of powers. C. The ratio of powers. 1. Quantum. In positing itself as self-identical in its otherness and in determining its own movement of self-surpassing, has come to be a being for itself. As such a qualitative totality, in positing itself as developed, it has for its moments the conceptual determinations of number, the unit, and the amount. This last, amount, is in the inverse ratio, still an aggregate which is not determined as amount by the unit itself, but from elsewhere, by a third determinate aggregate. But now it is posited as determined only by the unit. This is the case in the ratio of powers, where the unit which in it is amount is at the same time the amount as against itself as unit. The otherness, the amount of units, is the unit itself. The power is an aggregate of units, each of which is this aggregate itself. The quantum, as indifferent determinateness, changes, but inasmuch as the alteration is the raising to a power, the otherness of the quantum is determined purely by itself. The quantum is thus posited in the power as having returned into itself. It is immediately itself and also its otherness. The exponent of this ratio is no longer an immediate quantum, as in the direct ratio and also in the inverse ratio. In the ratio of powers, the exponent is of an entirely qualitative nature. It is this simple determinateness that the amount is the unit itself, that the quantum is self-identical in its otherness, and the side of its quantitative nature is to be found in this, that the limit or negation is not an immediate existence, but that existence is posited rather as continuing in its otherness. For the truth of quality is precisely to be quantity, or immediate determinateness as sublated. 2. The ratio of powers appears at first as external alteration to which a given quantum is subjected. But it has a closer connection with the concept of quantum, namely, that in the existence into which the quantum has developed in the ratio of powers, quantum has attained that concept, has realized its concept to the fullest. The ratio of powers is the display of what the quantum is implicitly in itself. It expresses its determinateness of quantum, or the quality by which it is distinguished from another. Quantum is indifferent determinateness posited as sublated, that is to say, determinateness as limit, one which is just as much no determinateness, which continues in its otherness, and in it, therefore, remains identical with itself. Thus is quantum posited in the ratio of powers, its otherness, the surpassing of itself in another quantum, as determined through the quantum itself. If we compare the progressive realization of quantum in the preceding ratios, we find that quantum's quality of being the difference of itself from itself is simply this, that it is a ratio. As the direct ratio, quantum is this positive difference only in the first instance or immediately, so that the self-reference which it has as exponent in contrast to its differences, counts only as the fixity of an amount of the unit. In the inverse ratio, as negatively determined, quantum is a relating of itself to itself as its negation, in which, however, it has value. As an affirmative self-reference, it is an exponent, which, as quantum, is only implicitly in itself the determinant of its moments. But in the ratio of powers, quantum is present in the difference as a difference of itself from itself. This externality of determinateness is the quality of quantum and is thus posited in conformity to the concept of quantum as quantum's own determining, as a reference to itself, its quality. 3. By being thus posited as it is in conformity to its concept, quantum has passed over into another determination. Or, as we can also say, its determination is now also as the determinanteness, the in itself also as existence. It is quantum insofar as the externality or the indifference of its determining, as we say, it is that which can be increased or decreased, is simply accepted and immediately posited. It has become the other of itself, namely quality, insofar as that same externality is now posited as mediated by quantum itself, and hence as a moment of quantum, so that in that very externality quantum refers itself to itself, is being as quality. At first, quantity as such thus appears in opposition to quality, but quantity is itself a quality. Self-referring determinateness as such, distinct from the determinateness which it is its other, from quality as such, except that quantity is not only a quality, but the truth of quality itself is quantity, and quality has demonstrated itself as passing over into it. Quantity, in its truth, is instead the externality which has returned into itself, which is no longer indifferent. Thus is quantity quality itself, in such a way that outside this determination, quality as such would yet not be anything at all. For the totality to be posited, a double transition is required, not only the transition of one determinateness into another, but equally the transition of this other into the first, its going back into it. Through the first transition, the identity of the two is present at first only in itself. Quality is contained in quantity, but the latter still is only a one-sided determinateness. Conversely, that quantity is equally contained in quality. That it is equally also only as sublated, this results in the second transition, the going back into the first determinateness. This remark regarding the necessity of the double transition is everywhere of great importance for scientific method. Quantum is henceforth no longer an indifferent or external determination, but is sublated as such. And it is a quality, and that by virtue of which anything is what it is, the truth of quantum is to be measured. Remark. We explained above, in the remarks concerning the quantitative infinite, that the difficulties associated with it have their origin in the qualitative moment that asserts itself in the sphere of the quantitative. We also explained how it is the qualitative moment of the ratio of powers which is particularly involved in a multitude of new starts and false starts. And we showed that the failure which chiefly stands in the way of a grasp of the concept of this infinite is that one stops short at it just as negative determination as the negation of quantum, and fails to proceed to its simple affirmative determination as qualitative. We now have only one more remark left to make. It concerns the intrusion of quantitative forms into the pure qualitative forms of thought that has occurred in philosophy. The ratio of powers, especially, has recently been applied to conceptual determinations. Thus, the concept has been called the first power in its immediacy, the second power in its otherness or difference in the existence of its moments, and the third power in its turning back to itself or as totality. It immediately occurs against this usage that power, as so used, is a category that essentially belongs to quantum and has no conceptual connection to the potentia of Aristotle. The ratio of powers indeed expresses determinateness in the truth that it has attained as difference. But difference, as found in the particular concept of quantum, not as it is in the concept as such. Quantum contains the negativity that belongs to the nature of the concept, but not as any way that already posited in the determination which is specific to it. So far as the concept is concerned, the differences of quantum are superficial determinations. They are still far from being determined as they are in the concept. It was in the infancy of philosophical thinking that numbers were used, as by Pythagoras, to designate universal essential differences, and for this purpose, first power, second power, etc., have no advantage over numbers. This was a preliminary stage in the process of comprehension by pure thought. Only after Pythagoras were the determinations of thought themselves discovered. That is, they were explicitly brought to consciousness. But to step back in this process to number determinations is the symptom of a thought that senses its incapacity, and, in an effort to stand up to the contemporary philosophical culture, which is accustomed to thought determinations, now adds the comedy of pretending that its weakness is something new and superior, a step forward. There is nothing much to be said against the symbolic use of the language of power, no more than there is against the use of numbers or any other kind of symbols for concepts. But there is also everything to be said against it, as there is against any system of symbols that pretends to convey pure conceptual or philosophical determinations. Philosophy has no need of any such aid, either from the world of senses or from the representations of the imagination, or also from spheres which belong to its own realm but are subordinated, and whose determinations are therefore unsuited to higher circles and to the whole. This last is universally the case when the categories of finitude are applied to the infinite. The common determinations of force or substantiality, cause and effect, and so on, are likewise only symbols when expressing, for instance, living or spiritual relations. That is, they are to them untrue determinations, and all the less true to them, or to speculative relations in general, are the quantum powers or the numerical powers. If one is to use numbers, powers, the mathematical infinite, and the like, not as symbols but as forms of philosophical determinations, and consequently as themselves philosophical forms, then one must start by defining their philosophical meaning, that is, their conceptual determinateness. But the moment this is done, they become superfluous designations, for the determinateness of the concept is its own designation, and this alone is the one which is both correct and fitting. The use of those forms is, therefore, nothing more than a convenient means for sparing oneself the task of grasping the determinations of the concept, of specifying and justifying them. That is probably the most eloquent slap that I've ever seen, right? This is a literary slap, right? The use of those forms is, therefore, nothing more than a convenient means for sparing oneself the task of grasping the determinations of the concept, of specifying and justifying them. He's like, y'all bitches lazy. And that's going to bring us to the end of the ratios. Hopefully I brought a little bit of enlightenment and not too much confusion to a somewhat difficult topic. I couldn't have brought too much confusion because I didn't have a whole lot to add. I didn't have a whole lot to add because, once again, I am not a polymath, right? I enjoy math much more than most people do. I actually understand that algebra is used every day when most people don't. But I've never studied calculus. I've never dove deep into ratios. All of these philosophical ruminations about these numbers make sense all the way through it. I understand what he's talking about. I'm just not qualified to extrapolate upon them, and so I don't. But if you find value in this, let me know down below. Give me a like, a share, a follow. Throw me a comment, whether you agree or disagree with anything that was stated. Put it in the box down below, and if it remains respectful, it gets to remain up. If there is another work you would like to see me read aloud or discuss, drop that in the box as well. And if you really like what I'm doing, hit me with that super thanks. Throw me a membership or buy a copy of my book. To the crew, thanks for hanging out. I appreciate every single minute that you are here with me, and I am praying for you every single day. Until next time, I love you. God loves you. You are perfect, whole, and complete just the way that you are. And this has been Pitt's Tape. Peace.